I'm going to start calling you that.
Ready?
Thomas Ready. Thomas Ready Marshall.
Or you could call me Tommy Bobby.
All right, good morning, everybody. Just a reminder, we are recording the meeting, so just be cognizant of that. Dr. Marshall already got it on recording that his middle name is Ready. He's always ready, so we will go ahead and get started. Just as a reminder, if you are not speaking, if you could please mute your line just so we eliminate any background noise, but please do not mute my FSSA line. That makes us really sad and we cry at night when you do, so please don't. I will work with Dr. Marshall to drive the agenda and move us forward. And then when we get to public comment, you can either shoot a message in the chat box, you can raise your hand, start speaking. We'll make sure that your comments are heard when we get to that point. I believe that's all of the announcements I have. So Dr. Marshall, I will turn it over to you for the call to order.
All right,
Please.
welcome. Let's start.
All right. Opening comments from OMPP.
None today, thank you.
All right, thank you. That takes us to approval of the minutes.
Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, may I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve.
This is Chris Johnson. Okay.
It's been moved and second to approve the minutes. Amanda?
All right, Dr. Marshall.
Aye.
Dr. Klaas.
Aye.
Ms. Pippin.
I abstained since I was not at the meeting.
Okay. And then Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Dr. Ott.
Aye.
Dr. Simon, I saw you just joined. Would you like
I
to
just
vote
joined.
for the minutes?
Is this acceptance of the meeting minutes from the last meeting?
It is.
I'll be an aye, yes.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Toma.
Aye.
All right, so we have all ayes and one abstention, so that motion will carry. Thank you. We will then move on to our update for the month. So for our PA stats for February of 2024, overall we were just shy of 20,000 being approved and a little over 8,000 denied. When we look at the breakout between our Silenoth, which spoiler alert, we've renamed Silenoth, so I'm going to be changing the name on here. They're now calling it Point of Sale Quick Check. No, I did not get to name it, so my apologies in advance, but it is the same exact system. Nothing has changed with it, just the name. So next month you may see a different name listed there. And then on the manual PA side, we've got the clinical call center. So for Silenoth, we had 74% approved, 26% denied. Of those that were denied, 23% of those went to the call center, where 78% were approved and 22% were denied. In the manual PA side, we had a 54% approval and a 46% denial, so running relatively close. When you look at our overall trending, you can see fairly consistent really with where we have been over the past several months now. For the Silenoth PAs, stimulants, opiates, and antipsychotics in the top three, I can tell you the stimulant outage continues pretty aggressively. We're seeing a lot of agents out, so we are seeing a lot of requests for different agents or different strengths or multiple quantities of one strength to get to a strength they were at before, and it's kind of constantly in flux. So 1 month it may be one thing and the next month it's something else. So I expect to see a lot happening, kind of continuing in that PA as it always is. And then no kind of real surprises on the opioids or antipsychotic side, pretty consistent with what it has been there. On the top 10 manual PAs, early refills in the top spot, not really surprising there either. It does go into that spot and maybe fluctuate in and out, but we are approaching some of the times off in spring break season, so we may see some of that. We may also see some early refills for this month next time around some of the tornadoes that we had hit Indiana yesterday, or last night, so don't be surprised if we see some of that around some of the disaster relief that's occurring. MHQAC and then laxatives and cathartics were in the top three, and you might remember in the laxatives we moved a couple to non-preferred, or I think one from non-preferred in there, so that's kind of causing those PAs to be a little bit higher.
Could you speak to anti-migraines and inhaled corticosteroids? Why there's such a high approval there?
So the anti-migraine space, as far as the high approval, is usually just around them meeting criteria. So if they have rationale, so usually we're focusing now a lot of times of what we're seeing PAs on are on the either the injectable CGRPs or the oral agents. So if they've tried those agents for kind of maintenance therapy, they all have PA on them. So we may be seeing some of those people requesting for maintenance therapy. So that's usually the most of what we're seeing, and most people, a lot of people meet that criteria. In the inhaled glucocorticoids, we have kind of more denied than are approved there. We do tend to see this group get a little bit higher over this season, just with people struggling with various illnesses, et cetera. So we do kind of always see a little bump here.
But we have pretty good coverage there. I'm shocked that there's that many approved.
So they would have to provide, to get to the non-preferred, they either have the step therapy that they have to meet on that side, or they have to have trial and failure of all the preferreds or rationale as to why they're not doing it. So from that standpoint, I mean, there are a few agents that they may be trying to get towards.
All right. Do
Any
we
other?
need to look at that? Does the key committee need to look at that?
Hey, Amanda.
I'm gonna pull up the PDL really quick, because as soon as I look at it, I should be able to tell which agent is
Okay.
hitting, because I manually put these PA requests together usually.
Okay.
But go ahead, Mr. Johnson, and I'll look at this while you're asking.
Hey, so Amanda, are the statistics here, are these February statistics?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, okay.
So my guess is what we're seeing some of this on is, based on what I've seen on there, is the budesonide inhalation suspension. When we do get into these illness times, those require PA for older individuals. And when I say older individuals, I mean like people 4 and older. So we're talking like anybody 5 and older is requiring a PA. And so when we have these illness times, we do tend to see an increase in those.
That budesonide. Okay.
And then I have seen a few been coming through for like the Arminair Digihaler. I know I've seen a couple of those, but nothing where I've been like, oh my gosh, we're just getting like bombarded with Arminair or anything like that. Usually the one that I feel like I see the most of in the respiratory space is Bevespi. We do get a fair amount of requests for Bevespi, which is something that we'll look at when we review with T committee.
All right, great. Thank you.
Any other questions that I can answer before we move on to opioids? All right. So our total utilization decreased just slightly, and our new utilizers decreased also just a little bit more, but also slightly. Our 18 years of age are pretty consistent with where they have been, and the 4.3 days of average day supply is holding pretty steady there. You can see the breakout of the less than 90 having the majority of our members, and then kind of the PA exempt folks. So actually, which this is exciting times, folks, in the 500 and above, the only people we have using 500 MMEs and above are PA exempt, meaning they have a cancer diagnosis or some other end of life diagnoses. So we now have all of our people kind of in the less than 500 range who don't have a PA exempt diagnosis. So we're making headway, we're making strides, which is very exciting in that space. So when we look at our graph, you can actually see that now we have 0 listed in the 500 and above, and that's because those members have a PA exempt diagnosis. Again, the vast majority of our members fall in the less than 90, but you can see where our folks are at right now. And we are at 475, is that right? On 4.1. So we're almost at 475. We're at 525 right now, and we'll be at 475 here in half a month. So luckily, we already have all of our people kind of under that 500 range, so hopefully we won't have too many people impacted by that 475 change. You can see in the overall trending, so just a reminder, the green tealy color at the bottom is our current utilizers greater than 18. The cranberry is the new, and then the bluish purple at the top is those under 18 or equal to 18. And so you could see overall holding pretty steady. Really, December, January, and February has been fairly steady months that we've had over this past kind of little time. So we were kind of having that, steady increase, and now we've kind of dropped back down just slightly and held pretty steady in that position right now for a little while. When we look at our overall trending kind of by MME, so you can see the less than 90 did increase for a while, kind of came back down a little bit, and again, it's kind of holding steady over those past 3 months. And then when you look at the rest, the 90 to 120 or less than 120 is the one up above. So we've seen a little bit of increase in there as well and kind of holding steady. And then the ones that we expected to see the decrease in, like the 500 and 750, we definitely have. They're down to practically zero. And then we've seen kind of people move into those other dosing ranges. So again, small population, small changes can really impact the graph. But overall, what we're seeing is kind of what we would expect to see at this point. Any questions on the opioid data before we move into our retro DUR proposal? All right. So I can tell you for this one, we did about every way you could slice data to try and make this a health equity initiative, because we really felt like there is some national data around this being a health equity disparity. And it's focused on individuals who have type 2 diabetes with concomitant CKD or cardiovascular comorbidities. There is a lot of data out there nationally that suggests that other non-white races or low-income groups, or even there's some disparity between men and women, even receiving older therapies and not receiving kind of the newer recommended guideline therapies of the GLP-1s and combinations or the SGLT inhibitors. So we did take a look at that from a health equity standpoint. Oddly enough, we're pretty even across the population on the fee-for-service side, as far as men and women and white and non-white, and kind of all the ways we could splice looking at that, we did. The one thing I will say, and it's just because I don't have the data to really do a compare, is there some potential that this is a health equity related initiative in the fact that we have, a large underprivileged population, and there's a lot of data there is data that suggests lower economic status is potentially at a disparity. I just can't find the exact percentage nationally of what kind of other economic statuses or commercial insurances or whatever their percentage of utilization is. So if we find that at some point, we may kind of leverage that a little bit. But at this point, we still think it's a good initiative to address because we do have a problem with it, and it's something that makes sense to look at. So there have been cardiovascular outcome trials that have looked at SGLT2, specifically inhibitors, although we do know we have some SGLT1 now, and the GLP-1 receptor agonists, and they do support protection against major cardiovascular disease, especially in those with established kind of risk or comorbidity. They reduce the admission to the hospital in those with heart failure, and they reduce overall cardiovascular and all-cause mortality in those patients. They also both have imparted significant CV and kidney benefits, and like we mentioned, but they're currently pretty underused in practice, even though they have those benefits. And so the guidelines do recommend that if somebody has type 2 diabetes and one of these concomitant diseases, they should be prescribed an SGLT2 and GLP-1, even kind of independent of their use of metformin. So basically meaning if they are newly diagnosed and have one of these other concomitant diseases or have never used metformin, kind of they're being recommended more first line because of those other benefits that they have. Individuals with these comorbidities already achieving glycemic goals with other medications still may benefit from switching to one of these medications if they're able to. So even if you've got a patient that's on metformin or on something else and they're at their glycemic goal, there's still data that suggests that they would have better outcomes if you switch their medications. And then I already mentioned the guidelines there. So that's kind of the rationale for looking at this. So when we look at our population, again, I told you we looked at this data a lot. So we identified 4,093 unique members having a type 2 diabetes diagnoses with what we're going to call one of the older basically therapies that are not a GLP-1 or an SGLT inhibitor. So we evaluated those. And then of those, we then kind of teased out who has a diagnosis of concomitant CVD or CKD. So then we're looking at about 1,634 members, or about 40% of that original group on the older therapies again. And so then we said, okay, well, people could be on older therapy, but also on a GLP-1 or on an SGLT inhibitor. So we pulled out those patients that maybe were on combination therapies. So we had 712 members of that group, which is about 44%, were utilizing a GLP or an SGLT inhibitor, along with one of the older therapies. So they were just on combination therapy. But 922 of our members, 56%, were not utilizing a GLP-1 receptor agonist or an SGLT2 inhibitor. And that included the combination agents for therapy having those diagnoses. So they would be, those 922 members would be good candidates to evaluate switching to a GLP-1 or an SGLT inhibitor. Any questions on that or rationale for that? All right, so what we're gonna look at as far as the retro-DUR is member demographics. It's all ages, both genders, all prescriber types. Again, kind of what we pulled in the data, do they have a type 2 diagnosis as well as a diagnosis for cardiovascular disease or chronic kidney disease? And then are they on one of the older agents that we've listed? Again, some of these agents aren't that old, but older compared to the others. And then no negating diagnoses, but negating therapy is if they are already on a GLP-1 or an SGLT2 or SGLT inhibitor or combination agent, and then obviously we wouldn't send a letter out to them. And then as far as our outcomes, we would be looking for either the addition or switch of to a GLP-1 receptor agonist or an SGLT inhibitor to their profile. Any comments, concerns, questions? And then
Are you-
go ahead.
Amanda, this is Chris. I think it would also be useful to see with these members that may be using some of the GLP-1s, DPP-4s, things, how many for cardiovascular disease, how many are also using preventatives such as statins, antiplatelets, aldosterone inhibitors, things like that, that would also be essential, I think, in first-line treatments before moving into some of these other agents.
So we do have a retro-DUR that's, did it finish yet or is it still going? I think it's still going for type 2 diabetes with a statin. So we are capturing that in the retro-DUR already. And I think the point of this retro-DUR is, yes, while I don't disagree that there's other agents they should be on, if they have type 2 diabetes and one of these conditions, the guidelines recommend either way that they be on one of these newer therapies, in addition to the other recommended therapies for heart failure CKD.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I ask is because from my experience here in Central Indiana, for cardiovascular disease and for diabetes, addressing cardiovascular risk with statins, for example, is not as high as it should be. And that's in the Medicare population that I work with. So there seems to be an avoidance of using statins, and I don't know if that warrants it, but being able to also see, are they treating with other medications that address cardiovascular risk, but negating some of the obvious items could be an opportunity for educational outreach.
Yeah, and we can try and make sure in our newsletter that we capture the other agents that would be recommended. And like I said, we have a current retro-DUR going right now on diabetes with statin utilization, like if they're not on statin therapy. So we do have one going on that, but I do think, to your point, carrying that language over in the newsletter, like these aren't the only recommended agents you should be on for these things. There are other recommended agents as well, and so we can try and capture that to try and bring it full circle. Dr. Ott, did you have a question too?
Yeah, I was just wondering, since you mentioned at the beginning this being a health equity initiative, and I think this is a great idea, I'm wondering, are you going to be able to gather those other demographics?
So we have the other demographics on the breakdown between male, female, white, non-white. What else did we pull? Oh, we did pull rural versus urban because I
good.
thought I was being so clever, like, oh, we're probably going to have a difference in rural versus urban. No, we did not. Poor Janine, we made Janine pull just about every form of data she could splice, and I think every day we were sending her a new data request, so she was probably ready to not be very happy with us. So what we did find though is there really wasn't any differences, because the way we pulled it is we looked at those who were on therapy, who had a GLP-1 or had SGLT inhibitor versus those that weren't, to see if we could see any like substantial, difference to show that it would be a health equity related. And we really just, every single category there was no difference aside from the fact that like we had the same level of non-utilization, right? Our non-utilization is not necessarily great, right? So we need to fix that. But there was no like discrepancy where I could be like, oh, we're not capturing this population. Do I think there's probably some level of economic status maybe coming into this? Maybe. I just don't have the full-on data yet to support how much commercial utilization is happening or something like that, where I can really do a compare versus fee for service. Yeah, so it may be something Dr. Toma is messaging to, I wonder if she's got something to capture for there, to loop into the Indiana Pharmacy Association of Health Equity Council. Okay, that might be an interesting thing to look at. So if we can find the data that supports that, like where we have a discrepancy there, we'll certainly like bring that out and capture that. We just haven't been able to capture it. And these therapies are newer, so then and some of these diagnoses are newer, so trying to capture all of that data yet probably eventually will be there. It just isn't fully out there publicly yet.
Okay, so when you go back and you do like any future data gather about this retro DUR, see if anything's changed, are you going to grab those other demographics and see if there's a difference then?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Surely. Any other questions or concerns or comments?
No, this is Giovanni, and for future, just FYI from the state perspective, because that data is available from CMS, and one of the biggest gaps that we see is particularly with the individuals that have low-income subsidies or full subsidies. They tend to have poor health outcomes than the traditional Medicare population, so that is very obvious in the dual eligible population. Unfortunately, the way that the state contracts right now with managed care entities, where we're covering the premiums, right, for Medicare, is that the MCEs or the managed care entities are not required to have an Indiana specific plan. So therefore, we have not been able to gather their data that would be specific for Indiana. We are looking to do that in 2025 for our dual eligible populations that are in a special needs program, where we will require the managed care entities to have an Indiana specific plan. So therefore, we will be able to capture this data specifically for the Indiana population. So make sure that we put that on the radar. And we're doing our 3-year quality strategy plan, where we are looking at adherence and A1C, so we'll be able to capture some of this data. But from the managed care entities, we see this biggest discrepancies is in the Medicare population, where we see less adherence and poor outcomes in the individuals getting low-income subsidies. And CMS has been capturing that data for several years and actually provides it to the Medicare Part C plans, where they look at, this is how well you perform with your traditional Medicare, and this is how poor you perform with your dual eligibles and for your low-income subsidies. And that is very, very obvious, and CMS is actually tracking that very closely.
Thank you. I will go ahead and go into the newsletter topics, and then we can just do a vote and a motion for everything, if you're fine with that, Dr. Marshall, since they carry over together. So our main article will be on the use of GLP-1 receptor agonists and SGLT2 inhibitor, sorry, it's like a just old habit. SGLT inhibitor agents in members with type 2 diabetes with cardiovascular or renal comorbidities. And then the secondary article is focused on health equity, and it's something that we haven't fully pulled yet, but it's something that we'd like to start kind of looking at as well. There is a lot of data out there nationally, again, that suggests disabled individuals are, I think it's 5 times more likely or 5 times at more risk for having diabetes, but then not being diagnosed as well. So, or underdiagnosed. So it's something in the future we may start trying to look at to see our individuals with disabled categories, how, if they've had A1Cs drawn or if they've had any kind of labs drawn to see if, you know, they're at risk for diabetes or potentially have diabetes, and try and take a look at that population. But since we're already doing a diabetes initiative, we thought we would try and carry this over in to have them tie together so that we could kind of focus on the whole picture and make sure, you know, people are aware of that and make sure they're capturing that and checking that.
Amanda, this is Petra. What
Yeah.
is considered a disabled individual?
So we have actual aid categories, and I don't know which, so I've got a listing somewhere of what each aid category means, but I don't, and if you look at the national guidelines, they qualify as anybody who's been able to claim disability or say they're disabled. So they're not very specific, so it could be mental, it could be physical, it could be kind of a whole host of things, but they found that they are at increased risk of diabetes and increased risk of being underdiagnosed.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that our psych patients were included in that, because I see a lot of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's whatever CMS considers defining as disabled.
It's a pretty set criteria.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
So Amanda, this is Chris again. If I could request, the main article I think is great. I would just ask that we also remind prescribers and providers of the importance of being able to use lower cost agents too, including like the statins, the antiplatelets, the angiotensin type agents out there too as well to reduce cardiovascular risk.
Yeah, we'll look at other recommended agents in the guidelines and make sure we capture kind of full circle what those would be.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? If not, if I could get a motion and a second for that, I would appreciate it.
This is Chris. I motion to approve the DUR board newsletter and DUR topic for review.
This is Lynn,
This
second.
Petra, I will second.
You got 2.
All right. Dr. Marshall,
Aye.
Dr. Klass,
Aye.
Ms. Fippen,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Ott,
Aye.
Dr. Simon.
Aye.
And Dr. Toma.
Aye.
All right, we have all ayes, so that will carry. Oh, yeah, so just, Courtney pulled it up for me really quick, and sent it really quick. Yeah. So just for edification, there's aid category 7, which is ARCH for disabled, then D is disabled, DI is working disabled, MedWorks improved, DW is working disabled MedWorks. Then there's qualified disabled working individuals and supplemental security income related individuals. Right, which quite frankly doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot to me at this moment, but I'm hoping that it means something to you if that's helpful. All right. Let's then go on to, we are up to the managed care updates. Any updates from managed care today? They were very animated over there a second ago until we said any updates. So, and I'm not hearing any from the phone, so I'm going to assume that we, yeah, okay. So then we will move on to our new drugs, which we do have something to cover here. So on our non-SUPDL-PA and step therapy agents criteria, we have a new budesonide suspension that I am going to lovingly call Yohilia because that's what makes sense to me. And for their criteria, it is diagnosis of eosinophilic esophagitis. And that is the only diagnosis the suspension has right now. Member is 11 years of age or older, and the dose does not exceed 4 milligrams, which is 20 mils per day. And then approvals will be granted for 3 months per lifetime.
So no retreatment?
Correct. At this time, based on their current
Okay.
prescribing information and approval. Any questions on the new drug? If not, if I could get a motion in a second, please, for that.
This is Carol. I move to approve.
Thank you.
Drew, second.
Thank you. All right. So we have a motion in a second. Dr. Marshall, Dr. Klass,
Aye.
Ms. Pippin,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Ott,
Aye.
Dr. Simon.
Aye.
And Dr. Toma.
Aye.
All right, we have all ayes, so that will carry. Thank you. Do we have any liaisons with other boards today? I will take silence as no. Do we have any public comment? No public comment in the room, right? I'm seeing nobody jump up. So how about on the phone? I don't think I saw any in the chat box, but if you're wishing to provide public comment, you can start speaking, raise your hand. All right, I am hearing and seeing none, so we will move on from that. Any old business? I'm also hearing and seeing none. Any new business before I go into my new business? All right. So for our new business, in the respiratory and allergy biologics PA, Xolair has a new indication, and it's around IgE-mediated food allergies. And so the criteria will look if they have a history of an IgE-mediated type 1 allergic reaction to one or more food allergens, and they need to kind of explicitly state what those food allergens are. And they should have a positive skin prick test for that identified food and positive IgE screening to the IgE screening to the identified foods. The member is 1 year of age and older, prescribed by in consultation with an allergist or immunologist, and that the prescriber attests that the member has been counseled to continue food allergen avoidance while using Xolair. So just of note, this is not a product that you can take and run out and eat your shrimp if you're allergic to shellfish. That will still not bode well for you. This indication is more focused on if you were accidentally exposed or something of that nature, that you would not then be rushed to the ER, hopefully, in that type of situation. And they did focus more on people with multiple food allergies in those situations. So unfortunately, people who are still allergic to things, you're still allergic to them. You can't go partake.
Hey, Amanda,
Alright.
can you go over that again? Your voice kind of dropped a little bit, and it was kind of hard to understand. Is this for chronic treatment, or is this for acute?
So it is a chronic treatment, but it's more focused on just being able to, if you would have an accidental exposure, so that you wouldn't then, be in a life-threatening in the hospital kind of reaction. It would hopefully tamper or prevent that reaction from happening. So like I said, if you're allergic to shrimp and peanuts, don't go to the shrimp and peanut bar and partake, because it's probably not going to be pleasant for you. So again, still small quantities and accidental exposure. You still need to practice food avoidance, but it's trying to lessen that potential reaction and take it from being something life-threatening to not life-threatening. All right. For the OTC, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I would have also a question on if a patient's in the process of desensitizing or attempting to desensitize that, this probably would be contraindicated.
Not that I'm aware of, because it's basically doing, I mean, it's not desensitizing in the same way that you think when you're doing desensitizing, but it is like tampering that IgE mediated response. So yeah, I haven't seen where they've said that it's specifically contraindicated though, at this time. Okay. On the OTC contraceptive agents formulary, there is an O-pill, norgestrel, that we're recommending adding to coverage under maintenance contraception for our preferred brand drugs list updates, and these will be implemented for us on 5/1. Additions to the brand preferred include Alphagan P, the 0.1% solution, Alrex, the 0.2, Bromsite 0.75, Condulex 0.5% gel, and Plaza tablets, and Prodaxa 110 milligram caps. And then removals include Amend 8 milligram capsules, New Vigil tabs, and then the Zegerid powder, which is an FYI. We did remove that much more rapidly than 5/1, and that's because it's a manufacturer backorder issue, so we didn't want to cause any problems for those people trying to access that medication. And that concludes all I have in new business. Any other questions or comments, concerns that we can address? Or any other new business we need to talk about before we take a vote?
Do we have a motion and a second then, please?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Dr. Marshall?
Aye.
Dr. Klaas?
Aye.
Ms. Pippin?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Dr. Ott?
Aye.
Dr. Simon?
Aye.
And Dr. Toma?
Aye.
All right, we have all ayes, so that motion is approved, and I believe that takes us up to the last agenda item, Dr. Marshall, which is adjournment.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your time. Have a great weekend. And great